We're going to learn a Sikha from Shabbos Parshas, Shabbos Nachmu. When we read after the Nachmu, it's the 16th of Menachem Av, and it's going to talk about the special advantage, since it's on the 16th of Menachem Av. It's going to speak about the special quality of the 15th of Menachem Av and the Simcha involved, etc. Let us begin from line 2, Ois Beis. And now this is, the Rebbe first began with Farbrengen with a mimer, and the mimer spoke, according to Chassidus, the idea of the fact that we say Nachmu, Nachmu Ame, that it's a double consolation, and it's a consolation for two Batim Mikdashes, and the connected it with the two luchas, the first luchas and the second luchas. We're going to speak about that a little bit later at the end part of these papers. But first, he's going to speak about, in general, about the advantage of the 15th of Av over Yom Kippur, in addition to what the Maimer spoke about. The Maimer, when it spoke about the idea of the 15th of Av, he spoke about that it follows Tisha B'Av. The fact that Tisha B'Av was the lowest time ever in Jewish history, so therefore the 15th of Av, which the 15th of the month is always the moon is full, that shows about a great ascent, but it's a great ascent that follows the great descent of the day of Tisha B'Av. Therefore, it's beyond and above any type of Yom Tovim, even other Yom Tovim that are on the 15th of the month, like the 15th of Tishrei, which is the Yom Tov of Sukkot, the 15th of Nisan, which is the Yom Tov of Pesach, etc., etc. So that's concepts that he was talking about in the Mamorim. Now he's going to speak about another concept about how the 15th of Av is even greater than Yom Kippur, even though it says there were no Yom Tovim like the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. But it says, at first it says 15th of Av, then it says Yom Kippur. Why would it say the total minig, like he's soon going to talk about, and then talk about something that's min HaTorah? Because the 15th of Av is even greater than Yom Kippur. So how is that the 15th of Av is even greater than Yom Kippur? That's what he's going to discuss right now. And the topic that we spoke about in the Maimer, about the advantage and quality of the 15th of Av over Yom Kippur, even though those two Yom Tovim are greater than all other Yom Tovim, but between the two, the 15th of Av is even greater than Yom Kippur. Yesh Oid Hezber, there's another explanation why there is the special advantage of the 15th of Av. It's known, was brought down in Tikkunei Zohar in Kabbalah, the Pirush Yom HaKippurim, in the meaning of the name of the Yom Tov called Yom HaKippurim. The simple meaning is, it's a plural of the word Kippurim is atonement, the Day of Atonements. So that's the way the Torah calls it, even though we usually call it Yom Kippur in the singular. But the interesting thing is that if it would just say Kippur, it wouldn't have the amazing message that Yom HaKippurim has. That is, Tikkunei Zohar says, Shuhu Kippurim. The day of Yom Kippur is K'moi Chag HaPurim, like the Yom Tov of Purim. This means to say, there is a comparison and a similarity between Yom Kippur to the Yom Tov of Purim. But even though they have a certain similarity, they have a certain common denominator, but the common denominator they have is still only a common denominator, is only a similarity, and one is greater than the other. The Yom Tov of Purim is even greater than Yom Kippurim. You only say that Yom Kippur is only like Purim. You add the letter Chaf that shows that something is similar to. So therefore, we're saying that Yom Kippur is not on the great level like Purim, even though they share a certain similarity. So first the Rebbe is going to explain the similarity between them, and then he's going to explain how Purim is even greater than Yom Kippur. Line 6, the comparison, the similarity between Yom Kippur and the Yom Tov of Purim is, first of all, Aleph be'inyan hagoyrel. They both share the similarity of lots, the idea of a lottery. B'yom HaKippurim, when it comes to Yom Kippur, v'nosan Aaron al shnei asirim goyrolis, it says that Aaron there are two goats that were picked out. One would be offered in the Beis HaMikdash, another one would be killed by being thrown down the mountain called Soy La'azazel. And which goat was chosen, it wasn't left to just the choice of Aaron HaKohen, which is very interesting, by the way. There are many korbanos that are brought in the Beis HaMikdash, including on Yom Kippur, and many korbanos that are brought throughout the year. And what happens? You have different animals, and you choose, and you say, this animal is going to be for this korban, this animal is going to be for this korban, this animal is going to be for this korban. There's no device set into place how to choose it. The kohen is going to pick whichever one is appropriate for a korban and finished. All of a sudden here, when you need to send the two goats, you make a girdle. Taraf bekalfi, you mix them up in a basket, the two lots, and you put one lot on one animal, and that lot that says that it's going to go to the Beis HaMikdash is offered in the Beis HaMikdash, and the lot that says on La'azazel is going to go, take that animal to be killed at Azazel, which is again a very strange means of deciding which korbanos, that we find no other time that you decide which korbanos you're going to choose to offer by lottery or something like that. It's just, you choose it and finish. So that itself, the very fact to do that even in the Beis HaMikdash is a very strange type of thing. But that is one of the things that we find by Yom Kippur, one of the unusual, unique things that we find by Yom Kippur, the idea of a lottery. Or b'Chag HaPurim, we also find the lottery. Hipil Pur, it says that Haman Arasha, through lots, hu agoydel, that means a lottery. So the whole name of the Yom Tov is for the sake of the lottery. So here is a common denominator. Yom Kippur had something unique that it had the lottery. Purim was about the lottery that Haman made. Beis, another common denominator between Yom Kippur and Purim, the inyan HaTshuva concerning Tshuva. Like the Alter Rebbe writes at length in the laws of Yom Kippur, and in the laws of Yom Kippur, Rambam, based on the words of the Rambam, the inyan mitzvah tshuva b'Yom Kippurim, concerning the mitzvah of tshuva, how and why and when does the tshuva performed when it comes to Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur, that's obvious. You don't have to elaborate upon it that the idea of Yom Kippur is tshuva. But the Rebbe goes on to say that Purim also has to do with tshuva. B'chein b'negel l'chag HaPurim, so too concerning the Yom Tov of Purim, kimavur b'Torah, let's explain in the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe on Megillas Esther in Torah Oir. So over there he writes, Shenes Purim by the tshuva. How did the miracle of Purim come about? It was through the fact that the Yidden did tshuva for whatever wrong they might have committed, that because of that they were endangered by Haman. That is the similarity. But we established before that despite the fact that the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur are similar, still and all, by saying the 15th of Av first as being one of those Yom Tovim, that there was no other Yom Tov like it for the Yidden, that establishes the idea that the 15th of Av is even greater than Yom Kippur. Afal became still in all, Yesh Maila B'Purim, L'Gabi Yom Kippurim, there's an advantage in quality in the Yom Tov of Purim over Yom HaKippurim. V'ad she Yom HaKippurim or HaKippurim, to such a degree that Yom Kippur is only like Purim, B'Chaf Adimin, with the letter Chaf, that indicates that it's only similar. What is the difference and distinction that makes Yom Kippur less than Purim? Because the tshuva of Yom Kippur is connected with 5 different types of afflictions that one is obligated to do so. Not eating, not drinking, etc. All the other things that a person is not allowed to do on Yom Kippur, all of them number 5. Altogether, they're number 5. Only through afflicting ourselves and separating ourselves from physical matters, that enables us to reach a state of tshuva that Yom Kippur is about. The ilu b'chag Purim, as opposed to the Yom Tov of Purim, chayev inish libsume, a person needs to become spiced and drink a lot. It's not just that Purim he's permitted to eat and drink, but he has to party over the top. Specifically, when it comes to the idea of spicing oneself up, drinking and partying in physical things, that brings to a state of tshuva. Now, this is what Chassidus was mechadish. You talk to an ordinary person, even a normal fruma person, he's going to say, what, as great as the tshuva as Purim is, but we're eating and drinking, it can't be such an unbelievable tshuva. Yom Kippur, we don't eat, we don't drink, so many things we don't do. We're mamish like malachim, like it says, Yom Kippur, Yidden are likened to malachim. So, the normal way of looking at it, or the common way how people look at it, in a frum environment, is Yom Kippur. Of course, it's greater the tshuva because it comes on through not being involved with gashmis. Chassidus says no. The very fact that a person can do tshuva while being engaged in gashmis, that shows on a much higher level. It's not such it's nishkin kunst, like we say in Yiddish. It's not a trick to be able to do tshuva while being removed from the world, while being completely divorced from physical things. The chiddush is, like we always have about the difference about the maraglim, in Eretz Yisrael being connected to Hashem, not while being in the midbar, surrounded by the clouds of glory and getting the mon min hashamayim. And the same thing, being in a physical party, having enjoyment from physical things, and at that very same time, being able to experience tshuva, that must be a much greater tshuva. That's a much higher level of tshuva. So that is where we see the quality and the advantage of Purim over Yom Kippur, that because of that, Yom Kippur is only Kippurim. Yom Kippur is only like Purim. Based on this idea about how Yom Kippur is only like Purim and Purim is higher than Yom Kippur, in a similar vein, we could apply this difference between the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, why the 15th of Av is greater. It says in the last paragraph on the page, line 15, in a similar vein, we could explain also concerning the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, on the one hand, there's a comparison, there's a similarity between them. Like it's understood from the words of the Gemara, the Gemara states there were no Yom Tovim for the Yidden like the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, which shows us that they're similar. But on the other hand, still in all, Shechamisha Aser Ba'av, the 15th of Av, Hunaila Yoser, Miyayim Kippurim. It's greater the 15th of Av than Yom Kippur. That's why the Gemara puts it first, that there were no Yom Tovim for the Yidden like the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. So he says, first of all, what is the difference? So it's similar to the difference of what Yom Kippur, how we observe Yom Kippur versus how we observe the 15th of Av. So he says in line 17, Ki Yom Kippur, when it comes to Yom Kippur, not only is Yom Kippur not included in the days that we don't say Tachnun. It's a Tachnun day. Ela Adrab, even more so, Amiras Tachnun ve'vidui hu inyan ikli ve'yom Kippurim yoiser b'shar yomim. Saying the supplication prayer, saying Tachnun, saying confession, saying vidui al chet and Hashem bagadnu, all of these things are not just like the rest of the year, but they're even more than the rest of the year. It's a core primary part of Yom Kippur. And specifically through reciting the vidui and the tachnu and the confessions, supplications, we reach and we attain the great heights of Yom Kippur. Let's contrast that with the 15th of Av. As opposed to the 15th of Av, it's a day that we do not recite in it supplication prayers, we do not recite in it confessions. This itself contributes, this itself leads us to the great advantage of the 15th of Av, to the great quality of the 15th of Av. The Nimtza comes out, it's so similar to this advantage of Purim over Yom Kippur. Purim we eat and drink, Yom Kippur we don't eat and drink. Yom Kippur is about supplication and begging forgiveness and confession. Chamish B'Av, we don't mention anything about sins. No tachnu, no vidui, nothing. But Nimtza comes out, Shemailus Chamish B'Av Gabi Yom Kippurim, at the advantage of the 15th of Av over Yom Kippur. It's similar to the advantage and quality of the 15th of the advantage of Purim over the Yom Tov of Yom Kippur. Now the Rebbe is going to bring in another thing. It's going to be a very interesting association. Let me, Ois Gimel, top of the page. The great quality, the advantage of the 15th of Av, we can derive from something additional to this. Let's first backtrack or give a little bit background. In the Beis HaMikdash, with the Karbonis, there was something called Nisuch Hayayin. Translated is a wine libation, where we used to pour on the Mizbeach wine going down. Those that were following Hilchos Beis HaBechira must probably, I don't know if maybe you didn't get to that part of it, where it describes the Mizbeach. It had like two holes to drain the wine that was poured on the Mizbeach by the Karbonis. That was ordinarily done, and that's open in the Torah. It speaks about the wine that had to be offered on the Mizbeach with the Karbonis. It comes during Sukkot. We had something called Nisuch Hamayim. We poured water on the Mizbeach. Not going to get into if it's an addition to the wine, but the point is, we had something that doesn't say explicitly in the Torah. The Chachamim had this halacha l'Moshe Sinai. They received this halacha from Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. It's not written openly in the Torah that we pour water on the Mizbeach. This idea indicates an interesting point that from this he's going to bring to our topic. Line 2. It's known the difference between the wine libation. That's explicit in the written Torah. It says it openly in Chumash to bring wine with the Karbonos. To the water libation that was brought on Sukkot, that in the oral Torah. Skip over line 4, to line 4 after the parentheses, skip the parentheses. Then there's something else that the Rebbe is going to bring into this equation. V'hakafis. On Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres, when we go hakafis with the Sefer Torah around the bima, shaloi nisker afilu b'Torah shabal peh v'urak minig. Hakafis is not even mentioned in the oral Torah; it's only a custom. So let's sum up. There is the wine libation; that is something that's explicit in the Torah. The water libation is not explicit in the Torah Shebiksav; it's only in Torah Shabal peh, but it's halacha. It's obligatory. It's an open thing in Torah Shabal peh. This is what you have to do. Then there's something that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch as a custom. It's not even obligatory, even from Torah Shabal peh's perspective. It's a custom to rejoice with the Torah on Simchas Torah. Now, there's a very interesting thing. Wine has to do with joy. Because, like we're going to bring the pasuk, wine makes people's heart rejoice. We know the water libation has to do with Simchas Beis HaSheva, the great joy that was on Sukkot. And then there's the joy of Simchas Torah, obviously. With that, we celebrate with hakafis. Yet, if we compare the three, we see these are different levels of joy. Line 5, V'afal pikein, even though Nisuch HaMayim, the water that's poured, is not explicit in Torah Shebeksav, so you would expect that it would be less than something that's openly in the written Torah. It's not that way. Hasimcha b'nisuch hamayim higdoyla yoser ma'asimcha b'nisuch hayayin. The rejoicing that has to do with the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach, on the Yom Tov Sukkos, is greater than the joy associated with pouring wine. What joys are associated with wine? The Afshein Simcha b'yayin, though the Chazal say the only joy is through wine. Val yayin, Namar concerning wine, it says Hamasamech Alakim Vanoshim, that it rejoices ministers or leaders and men. Mikol Malcolm still in all. Ein ze magia l'simcha d'nitzcha mayim. As much as wine is a joy-inducing thing, it doesn't reach the level of joy that's associated with the water libation in the Beis Hamikdash and Sukkos. The statement of Rabbeim, whoever did not witness the joy of the house of drawing, meaning the drawing of the water on Sukkos for the water libation, he never saw joy in his days. In other words, there's nothing like that joy, surpassing the joy of Nisuch Hayayin. So one would think, well, this is a little bit incongruous. This is Torah Shebeksav. Nisuch Hayayin says in the written Torah. Nisuch Hamayim is only something in Torah Shebal Peh, Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. Let's go even a step further, of an even greater joy. As opposed to the joy of the hakafis that we go around the bim with the Sefer Torah and Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, is greater than the joy of the Simcha Beis Sheva. Sharak, where do we see that was greater? By Simchas Beis Sheva it says, Sharak Gdoile Chachmei Yisrael V'Rosh Yeshivas Heim Shoyim Maragdim. The Rambam states, it's a quote from the Rambam, that only the great sages amongst the Yidden and the heads of yeshivas, they were the ones that were dancing by Simchas Beis Sheva, Aval Kol Ha'av, but the rest of the populace, they came to see and to hear the event. So that shows that the Simcha was not a full-fledged joy. It was only for the greater people amongst the community. The Ilu Ba'akafas, as opposed to the Akafas that we go to Sefer Torah, Kol Yisrael Ma'agadol Shebegdoil Ma'adakot Shebektanim Smeichim V'roiktim, all Yidden, from the greatest of the great till the most minor of the minor, they are rejoicing and they are dancing. So he says in line 11, V'lechura Eina Muven. How does that make sense? You have written Torah, you have the oral Torah, halacha, then you have minig. Which should be the most joyous one of the three? How is it possible that in the water libation that's only mentioned in the oral Torah should be a greater joy than the wine libation that's explicit in the written Torah? And then taking it a step further, similarly, how is it possible that only the custom of Akafis, Tia Simcha G'dol Yosef, should be a greater joy than the wine libation and the water libation that are respectively from the written and oral Torah? So the Rebbe goes on to explain, it's not just not contradictory, but it's actually the reason why it is so. Line 14, it's known the explanation concerning this. Alter Rebbe says this explanation, Shehi Anisan, is the very fact that it's not written in Torah Shebeksav brings us to the greater joy. Shemitzad goydel ha'ilui de nisach ha'mayim gabe nisach ha'yayin eina yachol lias nimshach b'Torah Shebeksav. It is such a great quality. The water libation, it's too high to have been revealed in the written Torah. And therefore, only the wine libation, which is not that high, could be written in the written Torah, and therefore the joy of the wine libation is not as great as the joy of the water libation because it's a much higher level. Taking it further, Umitzad goydla ilida kofis, and the great quality and advantage of our kafis is so great that it can't come down even in the oral Torah. It's only a minig amongst Yidden. And since it's so high, that's why it has an even greater joy. Which is, again, the way the Rebbe always takes things and turns it around. Now, the Rebbe is going to say, just like we just now, this was only brought in as an example for what we're about to say. Earlier in the Sikha we spoke about, there's Yom Kippur, there's Purim, and there's the 15th of Av. The Rebbe is going to say, just like we now explained, that there is wine libation is level 1. A higher level is the water libation. And a higher level even is the Hakafs and Simchas Torah, and therefore it's the greatest joy. The same thing is Yom Kippur, Purim, and the highest is the 15th of Av. Let's see line 17. So it will be understood concerning Yom Kippur. And the Yom Tov of Purim and the 15th of Av, that was explicit in the written Torah, just like the wine libations is something explicit in the written Torah. Chaga Purim, Divrei Kabbalah, Teresh Mapeh. The Yom Tov of Purim comes from words of Kabbalah. Divrei Kabbalah means the latter Sfarim, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. That goes into the oral Torah. That's like a rabbinic mitzvah. That's midrabanan. Ve'ilu Chamish Asar B'Av Rak Minig, as opposed to the 15th of Av, it's only a custom. The Kemai HaKafis, just like HaKafis is considered only a minig, it's not an obligatory thing. So we see these three levels in Yom Kippur, Purim, and the 15th of Av. Line 20 is going to bring an amazing thing now. Only in a Chabad Sefer can you find something like that. The Rebbe is quoting from a Maimer of the Rebbe Marash, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, that the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe discusses the difference between Tisha B'Av and Simchas Torah. So the Rebbe right away says, this is such a strange expression. What does that even mean? L'chura is a lashon muzar. It's a strange expression. Hein emes, though it's true. Shemitzad goydla yirida, the Tisha B'Av moving goydla aliyah, because the great descent of Tisha B'Av, so we said, so the 15th of Av that follows it, when the moon is full, like we learned at the beginning of the week, the moon is full, the 15th of Av, and it's following the great descent of Tisha B'Av. Okay, great, wonderful. It's amazing elevation that resulted from the great descent of Tisha B'Av. Fine. But what specifically the connection to Simchas Torah? How do you even compare the two? How can you even mention it in the same breath? What's the difference in Tisha B'Av and Simchas Torah? It's like, it boggles the mind. So the Rebbe says in line 23, but the idea behind this is Shemitzad Goy La Yerida the Tisha B'Av, because the great descent of the 9th of Av. Nasa Goy La Ilu the Chamish Asar B'Av, B'Ifn Naili Yosim Yom Chamish Asar Shebachol Chodesh. There becomes the great ascent of the 15th of Av in a much higher level than the 15th of every month, Shekayim Masir Bashlemus, when the moon is fullest, like we've been mentioning before. That every month, when it comes the 15th of the month, it's a powerful day, because the Jewish people count to the moon and they are likened to the moon. And when the 15th of the month comes, the moon is full. That means the Yidden are in an ascendant state. And the Pri Eitz Chaim says, this is the mile of the 15th of Av. But if so, all the Mamorim and all the Sikhs ask, but you have 15th of other months, especially there's the 15th of Tishri, which is Sukkot. There's the 15th of Nisan, which is Pesach. Still in all, it's greater, the 15th of Av, than the 15th of the month of every other month. That including that's greater even than the 15th of Tishrei, that's the Yom Tov of Sukkot, that way it's explained in the Maimer. So once we know that the 15th of Av is greater than the 15th of even Tishrei, which is Sukkot. Therefore, v'kiven shechamisho basar ba'av doimel Simchas Torah. Since the 15th of Av is similar to Simchas Torah, kanal benegel inen hakafis, like we mentioned before, we have 3 levels: nisacham hayayin, nischamayim, and then hakafis. So we have also 3 levels: Yom Kippur, Purim, and the 15th of Av. So it relates to it. 15th of Av relates to Simchas Torah. So since 15th of Av is like parallel to Simchas Torah in its being a custom and being a great Yom Tov, therefore one could connect the 9th of Av to this as well, because the 9th of Av is the reason why the 15th of Av is so great. At a movement, so it's understood, he says in line 26, Shagam Tisha B'Av Shemanu Boim Li'ilu D'Chamisha B'Av. Also the 9th of Av. That from that we come to the great advantage of the 15th of Av. Doimel Simchas Torah is also similar to it. That's why the Rebbe Marash says in the Maimer the difference between the 9th of Av and Simchas Torah. But we don't go dancing on the 9th of Av, even though the 15th of Av is about dancing. Al Shabbat Tisha B'Av. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, Hadei Zebekava Yerida V'Hel. This great advantage and quality is still in a line of descent and concealment, and the actual joy is not revealed, and it's prohibited for us to engage in joy on Tisha B'Av. But when the 15th of Av comes about, so we say there were no Yom Tovim like the 15th of Av. Even Yom Kippur is not like it. So that's also in the line of ascent and revelation. Now the Rebbe said this Sikha on the Shabbos Nachmu, on the 16th of Av. So he's building up from the 15th of Av and connecting the same theme with Shabbos Nachmu. So he says in line 28, Shem Shadvar Mamurim, just like this is all true concerning the 15th of Av, that's the ultimate and highest level possible. Keinu benegel the Shabbos Nachmu. So too is concerning Shabbos Nachmu. Shari b'yoyim ha-Shabbos Oilim Kol Yimei HaShavua. The Rebbe always mentions that Shabbos, Chassidus especially emphasizes, elevates all the days of the week. It's understood that the ascent that takes place in this Yom Shabbos, more than any Shabbos of the rest of the year, since it's following the great descent of Tisha B'Av, it's an amazing type of ascent. And then the Rebbe concluded with the idea that these days should be transformed to rejoicing and happiness and to Yomim Tovim. You'll learn another small piece from the next part, the next Sikha of that Farbrengen, where he connects the double Nachmu with the double Luchas that I also mentioned was spoken about in the Maimer. So the Rebbe says, Duber Le'el Ba Maimer, earlier in the Maimer, that the Rebbe said at the beginning of the Farbrengen, it was spoken about Oides Ha'inyan, the Nachmu Beisbam, the fact that the Haftorah begins, comfort you, that you, the Jewish people, should be comforted. And it says it twice. Shezel Keneged Bayis Rishon or Bayis Sheni. The Chazal say that why were we comforted twice? For the loss of 2 Bate Mikdashes. One comfort was to comfort us for one Beis HaMikdash, and another comfort was to be comforted for the second Beis HaMikdash. So the Rebbe explains, Vahainu, this means that regardless of the fact that we are already comforted for the first Beis HaMikdash, shegam la'achre sheyeshna kvar hanechama al bayis rishon, even after there is the comforting that we are consoled for the first Beis HaMikdash destruction, there needs to be also that we are comforted and consoled for the second Beis HaMikdash. How come? Isn't the first Beis HaMikdash greater than the second? Once we are consoled for the first Beis HaMikdash, what need is there to console us for the second Beis HaMikdash? So the Rebbe says, over here very in short, but in other places the Rebbe speaks at length about it, the second Beis HaMikdash had in it greater qualities in some aspects than the first Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, just being consoled for the first Beis HaMikdash is not going to help us for the destruction of the second base of Mikdash. We need a separate consolation for the advantage of the second base of Mikdash. The Rebbe said the second base of Mikdash stood 10 years longer. The first base of Mikdash stood 410 years. The second base of Mikdash stood 420 years. Another advantage of the second base of Mikdash is it was a taller building, a more beautiful building than the first base of Mikdash, or at least a taller building. And all of these advantages in the physical sense of the extra years and the taller building, these are actually indications of a greater spiritual advantage that the second base of Mikdash had. And therefore, we need to be consoled and comforted for both. And that's why it says twice Nachmu. In a similar vein, the Rebbe also connects it with what we speak about in this week's Parsha, about that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos and he was given a second set of luchos. So he says in the second paragraph, line 4, so too it's concerning the first luchos that Moshe Rabbeinu was given and versus the second luchos that Moshe Rabbeinu had. In the second luchos there is addition over the first luchos, like we said before in the Maimer. Even though we know that spiritually the first luchos were much more divine and godly and more Hashem's creation, and whereas the second luchos it was more Moshe Rabbeinu's writing, etc., etc. Yet still in all, Chazal say that with the second luchos so much more was given, Medrash and Agadah and Torah Sheba'al Peh, which in the first luchos was not given. So just like we said in the first base, the second base of Mikdash had things and had a spiritual elevation that the first base of Mikdash didn't have. The same thing, the second luchos had something that the first didn't have. And the Rebbe discussed this in the Maimer. Val Pizeh, once we realize that the second luchos had things that the first luchos didn't have, so Kdimtza comes out. The breaking of the first luchos is not really an idea of breaking. Shari Adra, but just the opposite. Because only through it was added and increased over the first luchos. Like we've spoken this example before, that when a person is remodeling a home, so he breaks down the original home and he builds a totally new home. So the only way you could build that more beautiful home is if you break the first home. Obviously, if it's a minor remodeling, you don't have to break it. But the more intense and the more beautiful and the greater the second home is going to be, the more you got to get rid of the first home. So therefore, someone that knows what's going on and he sees a home that completely is destroyed, he's not going to say, what's going on over here? It's terrible, it's horrible, there's a broken down home over here, it's a churban. No, he's going to see, yes, we're building here an amazing building now. The same thing, this is the Rebbe often brings as the difference between, let's say, the first two Bate Mikdashes versus the third base of Mikdash, but the same idea applies concerning the first luchos and the second luchos. Since in the second luchos so much more Torah was given than in the first luchos, so if you look at it internally in the meaning is that really the breaking of the first luchos is then able to reach the higher level of the second luchos. And this is a guideline in everything in life. When things seems to be going wrong, they're really going right. And they're really, all that negative is to reach a higher level than even before the negative. And the Rebbe says this idea about how the message, how the breaking of the first luchos is really part of, and it's not about breaking, it's about bringing a higher level. So it says in line 7, this is emphasized in the Ten Commandments the way they're written in Parshas V'eschanan. Two places in the Torah it says the Aseres HaDibros. In Parshas Yisro when it was first given, and then in Parshas V'eschanan speaks about that Hashem gave the Yidden the Aseres HaDibros and said to the Yidden the Aseres HaDibros. Though, when was Eschanan said? It was said in the 40th year, before the Yidden were about to go into Eretz Yisrael. So this parsha was said way after the sin of the Egel and the breaking of the Luchos. But what's the theme? What does it speak about? we relate in it about the 10 dibros that were said before the sin. What does that tell us? Even after the sin of the Eitzadas, not Eitzadas, the Egel, which seemed to have caused a breaking, you should know it's not really broken. The Aseres Hadibros that were there before the sin is there now also, even after. And it concludes, line 10, this is also the rule that the Torah is everlasting, and it will never be changed, heaven forbid. The second luchas that were given is not something different. They're not an exchange for the first luchas. It's rather one continuation, which is what the Rebbe always says about the 3 Bati Mikdashes, that the third Beis HaMikdash is a continuation of all the Bati Mikdashes, including all the way back to the Mishkan. So therefore, all those destructions that preceded are not about destructions. They're only about reaching a higher place.